Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel, hope you're all doing well. So a few weeks ago I shared with you part 1 to this Cheetah tutorial where I shared with you my overall process for achieving those kind of realistic eyes in coloured pencils. I'll leave the link to part 1 below, so if you want to go back and start with the first one then you can do. The full in-depth version can be found over on my Patreon. There's a backlog of over a year's worth of in-depth tutorials, focus tutorials, art business tips, materials videos and loads more of like animal-based tutorials, focusing on professional coloured pencil techniques. So I'll leave the link to my Patreon below if you're interested in joining. It's a subscription basis that you can cancel at any time and you can join one of 3 tiers depending on like how advanced you want to go with your coloured pencils. So for part 2 of this tutorial then, I'm going to start drawing the surrounding fur. With coloured pencils you always want to start with your base layers first, kind of considering any vibrant undertones that you want showing through the fur. So I'm going in with a buff titanium luminance pencil, which is a really pale yellow colour. The luminance pencils are predominantly wax based, so they provide that really smooth base layer to draw on top of. You then want to start mapping out those darker spots and patterns in the fur by lightly using a warm grey 4 polychromo pencil. Building up the mid-tones, I'm going to use a mixture of the raw Umber 10% luminance pencil and the Beige Red polychromo to add that subtle warm pink tone. I'm also using the silver grey luminance pencil in the pale white bits of fur just to add a subtle blue tint to it. With the dark sepia, I'm darkening the patterns in the fur and defining the shapes a little bit more. You want to make sure you're always drawing in the same direction as the fur so the edges merge together and everything looks like it's part of the same fur. Back to building up the mid-tones, I'm using a variety of brown shades like the Dyck-Brown and the Nougat, which are both polychromos. At this point it's looking fairly neutral, so I'm going to add some more vibrant colours to that golden fur just to make it a little bit more rich, but we still want to keep blending everything together in between layers so we end up with smooth, soft looking fur. And Cheetah's fur is quite thick and fluffy, so it's important to build up that tonal value. I think actually using a mixture of Faber-Castell Polychromos and Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils together is really good, especially when you're drawing animal fur, because they just complement each other really well. I'm using shades like the cream, green gold and the brown ochre polychromos to add that bright gingery element that will help to capture the lighting that's bouncing off the fur. With a much harder pressure, you want to go back in with that dark sepia and start squashing down the tooth of the paper to reduce that grainy texture from the paper underneath. This should also darken and define those patterns within the fur, and if you can, still try and keep the edges soft so it continues to merge with the surrounding fur. I'm adding some subtle burnt orangey tints along with some warmer tones, as well as darkening that black stripe that runs from the inner corner of the eye all the way down the face. At this point you can start focusing more on the details in the fur, so really focusing on those really tiny tufts and the kind of texture of the fur, and start drawing in some of those fine wispy hairs that are kind of falling in front of the fur with the black. And finally I'm going to use the craft knife slice tool to pull out some of those highlights in the fur. The slice tool is such an essential thing to have if you're a colour pencil artist, because it just gives you that extra little bit of detail that takes that realistic element to the next level. It has a ceramic blade which you can use to basically remove those top layers of pigment to reveal the white paper underneath. You're almost lightly scraping away areas to draw some of those highlights back in. It's brilliant for pulling out individual highlighted hairs. It's great for whiskers and intricate light reflections in the eyes as well. I'll leave the link to the slice tool that I use in the description below. So that's it for part 2 for this short tutorial. Like I said at the start, you can get exclusive access to this tutorial and so many more animal-based colour pencil drawing tutorials over on my Patreon. The link is in the description below if you fancy it, and thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel to see more.